As inflation ticked up across the world, many governments accused companies of raising prices faster than necessary and tried to pressure them into accepting lower profits for the sake of stable prices. In China, however, the CCP are having the opposite problem. Price wars in new industries are pushing down prices too fast for Beijing's liking, exacerbating China's ongoing deflationary crisis and risking dangerous debt bubbles as companies take on more debt to survive the price wars. So in this video, we're going to take a look at China's price wars, why the CCP really don't like them, and how they might be fixed. Could you rank every single politician in the world? Hear our thoughts and argue with us on our podcast, The World Leader Leaderboard. Find it on the TLDR Podcast YouTube channel or in your favourite podcast app. So let's get straight into it. The most remarkable price war is going on in China at the moment, and the one that's drawn in the most media attention is happening between China's electric vehicle or EV manufacturers. This price war began way back in late 2022 when Tesla offered substantial price cuts on its Chinese-made models. Big Chinese EV companies like BYD responded with their own price cuts in 2023, and prices have been trending down ever since. But the price war intensified dramatically a couple of months ago, after BYD, the largest car maker in China, announced steep cuts on 22 of its EV and hybrid models, with the BYD Seagull now on sale for less than $8,000 in China. By this point, most Western car makers operating in China have essentially bowed out of the price war, and it's now essentially between homegrown Chinese brands. Now, you might think that this will make the price war less intense, but because there are over 100 homegrown EV companies operating in the Chinese market, many of which enjoy the backing of local governments, that's simply not the case. In fact, the price war has been so brutal that industry profits have now fallen to their lowest level ever, and a number of EV companies have already filed for bankruptcy. But while the EV price war has been particularly brutal and attracted the most media attention, similar things are happening in other sectors too. In the solar industry, for instance, prices have fallen by something like 80% in the past 2 years. The cost of reinforcing bars, a key steel product used in construction, has fallen to its lowest level since 2017, while glass prices are hovering near a 9-year low. The EV price war has even spread to other parts of the EV supply chain, as car makers have put pressure on their suppliers to accept lower prices or delayed payments. Battery companies have been cutting their prices, for instance, and basically every big car company has also started issuing so-called promissory notes to parts suppliers, which basically say, we can't pay you right now, but we promise to pay you later. Across the industrial sector as a whole, the fraction of companies reporting losses has risen to the highest level since 2001, while the number of bankruptcy cases has tripled between just 2020 and 2024. This has all been exacerbated by Trump's trade wars, which have effectively reduced US demand for Chinese products, forcing industrial companies to cut prices in an attempt to find new sources of demand. Now, at first, this might sound like a good thing. After all, price wars mean lower prices for Chinese consumers, who wouldn't want a zippy electric car for less than $8,000, and it should lead to a much-needed consolidation in overcrowded sectors like EVs. But the severity of these price wars has caused some anxiety in Beijing. This is mainly because these falling prices mean more deflation, at a time when both China's consumer and producer price indices are currently negative, and China looks increasingly like it might be stuck in a Japan-style deflationary crisis. Price wars also mean bankruptcies and job losses, which could create more deflationary pressure via weaker domestic demand. It's also a problem because super aggressive price wars encourage affected companies to take out debt, in the hope that the debt will allow them to survive until the price war ends. But while this might make sense on an individual level, if every company in the sector starts doing the same thing, you run the risk of a full-blown debt crisis. This is sort of what happened in China's property market. Every property company assumed that house prices would rise forever, so took out massive amounts of debt to build as many houses as possible. But when prices stagnated, these companies couldn't pay off their debts, triggering a full-blown housing crisis with consequences for the wider economy. Furthermore, price wars also encourage local governments to spend more and take on more debt to support local champions. For context, lots of Chinese companies, especially in the EV sector, are supported by their local governments via direct or indirect subsidies. To protect their local champions during these price wars, local governments will be tempted to provide more subsidies. And these new subsidies will probably be funded by debt, given that local governments have limited tax-raising powers, and most of the tax they do raise goes straight to Beijing. This risks exacerbating the pre-existing local government debt crisis, which we've done a number of videos on before. The TLDR here is that local governments essentially use land that they owned as collateral to borrow money. But when property prices went down, and land prices went down with them, this pushed many local governments into the red, and the central government has even had to bail a couple of them out. If local governments borrow dangerous amounts of money to protect their local champions during the price war, they could end up in another debt crisis, especially if their local champions don't actually survive the price war. To recap, while price wars might mean cheaper prices for Chinese consumers, they create at least two macro risks for the Chinese economy. One, they risk exacerbating China's deflationary crisis, and two, they risk creating another debt crisis in either specific sectors or at the local government level. And this is why the CCP are actively trying to stop the price wars. As early as last December, the CCP were warning that the price wars represented a form of involution, or nejuan. In other words, the price wars actually made an industry weaker by encouraging unsustainable amounts of debt and squeezing investment. In May, China's industry ministry told Xinhua that, quote, there are no winners in the price war. And in June, CCP officials hauled in executives from 16 Chinese car makers to warn them to stop cutting prices and delaying payments to their suppliers. Interestingly, the CCP has faced this problem of chronic industrial deflation before, in the late 1990s and then again in the mid-2010s. Both times, Beijing was able to resolve the problem by essentially telling state-owned companies to reduce production, thus limiting supply and bringing up prices. The difference today is that the current price wars are happening in industries dominated by private companies, not state-owned ones, who don't blindly obey the CCP. This was made apparent early last year when the CCP brokered trade truce between 33 private companies in China's solar industry collapsed, which is yet more evidence that the only real solution to this deflationary crisis is to increase domestic demand, not just cut supply. More broadly though, it really does feel like we're in a period of political change at the moment. Gone are the days of predictable geopolitics, with Trump's America taking increasingly dramatic turns, so much so that it feels that America's influence, popularity, and dominance are all on the decline. So in the next issue of our magazine, Too Long, we're discussing this shift, and the potential that we're currently observing the end of the American order. In that section of the magazine, we discuss our thoughts on everything from the collapse of democratic norms to if America is losing allies, and if the country can maintain its dominance in energy and tech, before discussing who could potentially take over in a post-American world. So if you want to find out what we really think about America, now's your chance. It's not just the US either though. This issue is our longest ever at 78 pages. So we also get into stories like why El Salvador and Kosovo are becoming the world's penal colonies, if the UK is lacking vision at the moment, if Europe can really defend itself, and why leaders like Putin and Netanyahu seem to be getting away with it. Plus, we also have a full interview with Professor James Kerr-Lindsay, who you might also know from YouTube, all about the collapse of the global order. Now, if that all sounds good to you, but you'd rather listen than read along, then you should check out the premium edition. Because anyone who buys a premium edition of our magazine also gets access to our recordings of selected articles. Plus, you also get access to the full 90-minute interview with James Kerr-Lindsay. On top of that, premium subscribers also get access to our behind-the-scenes podcast, The Bullpen. Regardless of whether you opt for the regular or premium edition, if you never want to miss an issue, then make sure you subscribe to Too Long, which gets you 20% off every copy as long as you stay subscribed. Plus, this week only, if you use the code BESTOFFER when signing up for a subscription, you'll get an additional 35% off. That brings down the cost as low as £5.20, or a wild 48% off. That is the best offer we are ever going to offer. So pre-order your copy today to get yourself that extra content and support all of the journalism we do here at TLDR every single day.